Got a new theory being posed in relation to Derrick Groves, one of the 10 prisoners who escaped from a New Orleans jail back on May the 16th. Folks, we are like 7 or 8 weeks separated from that escape. 9 of the 10 escapees have been captured, all except for Derrick Groves, who it is now being reported could have potentially changed his identity. This is a theory that I floated early during this escape situation, saying that if a prisoner was to stand any real chance of getting away, they're gonna have to stay off the radar completely, while also somehow staying out of sight. Something that Antoine Massey, the 9th fugitive to be apprehended, did not do. And in fact, when you try to compare Derrick Groves to Antoine Massey, both of these guys went about their fugitive run in complete opposite ways. Antoine Massey took to the internet. Derrick Groves has not been seen since the morning of May the 16th when the escape first took place. Where is this guy? Is there the real likelihood that he has gotten out of the country? Are authorities still believing that he may not have left the state and could potentially be right underneath of their noses, just like Antoine Massey was? Possibly even still in the city of New Orleans. Well, if he is, he most certainly has to be in the sewer system somewhere underground. Because I personally find it pretty damn interesting that nobody has seen this guy in almost 2 months. And maybe that reason's because people wouldn't even recognize him if they did see him. Folks, a new theory has been posed that Derrick Groves is now carrying on his day-to-day life dressed as a woman. That's right, folks. Take a look at some of these images generated with Derrick Groves as a woman. There's a possibility you might have been right behind this guy in the grocery store and didn't even realize it. I mean, look at this. Just with a wig and shaving that pencil-thin mustache, this guy looks like an entirely different person. And crazy to think that if you go on the run and you escape from a jail or a prison, this is the type of shit you're going to have to do. Look what Antoine Massey did, on the other hand. Nothing of the sort. Going as far as taking to the internet trying to proclaim his innocence, pleading to the likes of Donald Trump, Lil Wayne, Meek Mills to help him prove his case. Derrick Groves, on the other hand, went to a wig store instead, or at least sent somebody there. Could have potentially been hoarding any commissary money that he came across, knowing that wigs aren't cheap. At this point, Derrick Groves could be in Canada right now with an assortment of different hair pieces. You know, here is a guy who has been convicted of 4 different bodies. 2 murders, 2 manslaughters. You want to talk about the most hardcore trained-to-go individual that there is? Out here as an escaped fugitive, having to play dress-up. This shit is diabolical, if you ask me. But again, if you want to stand any real chance of making it as a fugitive, and Derrick Groves is a perfect example because he has done so, this the type shit you are going to have to do. I wonder if these wigs are good enough to beat any sort of facial recognition cameras and software. Absolutely not. Which is crazy to think with so many big cities that actually have these type of cameras in place. Again, how is it that this guy has not been seen in almost 2 months? Wherever he's at, he must not be leaving the house. And clearly, it's obviously somewhere where the authorities have no frickin' idea. I would imagine out of the state, and better yet, possibly even out of the country. Do you think that this guy makes it for the long run? I mean, he's already proving to stand a pretty decent chance of doing so. But I think even dressed up like this, you know, people would still potentially recognize him. And then, geez, whoever put together this collage, I mean, you basically threw this man right up underneath of the bus. There goes that idea right out the window. Because now people are going to know what you look like in disguise. But let's talk a little bit more about Derrick Groves. Some interesting things that I'm just running across in relation to this last remaining fugitive. And also some things that are being posed by people either from the area or at least claiming to know. Obviously more than I do. I ran across a story from back early in June, about 2 weeks after this escape took place, talking about Derrick Groves, 27 years old, convicted in October of killing 2 people. His sentence was supposed to bring relief to New Orleans and renewed confidence in law enforcement, but it did not, because he would end up escaping. It's crazy that this story mentions that he was convicted in October of killing 2 people when I've seen other stories mention that it's been 4 bodies.
Groves was accused in 4 killings, leading to convictions on 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of manslaughter.
They say less than a year later, Groves, who pleaded guilty to battery of a correctional officer, that's new information to me. Not only did this guy have these murder charges, he also was in the jail, effing up guards, it appears to be. But you know what's interesting to me is a lot of the guys who escaped had similar charges. Battery of a correctional officer. Could this potentially be some sort of smoke and mirrors? Maybe this facility is just quick to throw these additional charges on you, but that doesn't make sense because this facility, the Orleans Parish Justice Center, doesn't even really have the capability to house solitary confinement in shoe-like prisoners, or at least prisoners who are deserving of being in those type of settings. And for those of you who may not remember, it was the sheriff, Susan Hudson, who actually disbanded solitary confinement in the jail pretty much as soon as she got into office. And that was something that we discussed in a previous video, talking about all things in relation to this escape. And the fact that this particular jail didn't even really have the means to be able to handle these type of prisoners. So instead of putting them in solitary confinement, they just put them in Gen Pop, all together on the first floor. But it's interesting that Derrick Groves also has what appears to be a street charge, saying that he pled guilty to battery of a correctional officer because other prisoners that we've talked about in relation to this escape had similar charges. Maybe birds of a feather flock together and all of these guys were just hyper violent. But they say less than a year later, Groves, who pleaded guilty to battery of a correctional officer, broke out of the jail with 9 other men and escaped into the dark New Orleans night. It's almost like some folklore type-ish right here. But I want to get to some of the comments on this particular post because they talk more about Derrick Groves and these murder charges that he had. And I can't confirm nor deny that this information shared is true, but it's certainly enough to make you think. Now, also to mention real quick, Derrick Groves has an interesting story in relation to law enforcement. Basically, his whole life, he was probably raised to resent law enforcement, given the fact that before he was born, I believe it was 3 years before he was even born, a dirty cop would hire a hitman to kill his grandmother. I'm not sure what the reasons behind that situation were, but when Derrick Groves came into the world, that's probably all that he knew of law enforcement, that they weren't to be trusted, and that one of them had actually killed a family member of his. So mentioning that, some of the comments on this particular post say things like, he unalived people connected to people who unalived his grandmother who were hired by the police. Look it up. Is that true? Was Derrick Groves some sort of hood version of a Denzel Washington equalizer? Carrying out vigilante justice, holding court in the street? Vindicating what happened to his grandmother years before he was even born? I don't know. But that's certainly an interesting theory that's being posed here. They also talk about the murder charges and trials that Derrick Groves went through, saying it took 4 times to convict him. In the Constitution, that is double jeopardy. They are violating his rights. That is an interesting point to bring up. Was this man found not guilty in any of those cases? And then those charges were brought up again? Because if that was the case, that is double jeopardy. But a hung jury is what I believe was how one of the trials at least played out. And in cases where a jury is hung and can't reach a verdict, the state more than likely is going to retry the case again with a different jury. But they say it took 4 times to convict him. I'm not exactly sure why. Obviously, they were gung-ho to get this guy convicted. It's with these type of things, the murder of his grandmother, the fact that it took 4 trials to get this man convicted, that he has become somewhat of a martyr, somewhat of folklore and hero-like, where people are really rooting for this guy to get away. Does he deserve to? And also keep in mind, there's a $50,000 bounty still on this guy. And with as lucrative and as tempting as that life-changing money would be for anybody, still nobody has been able to provide the information that's led to this guy's apprehension. So maybe this guy's over in Thailand somewhere. If he got out of the country, my theory is it's going to be a long time, potentially never, before the authorities catch up with him. But you know, just getting out of the country doesn't necessarily mean that it's smooth sailing from there. I mean, think about running to Mexico. Probably what people would hypothesize is the easiest place to get to, or at least the best place to try to get to if you escape from prison. Crossing that border is going to be one thing, but let's just say that some kind of a way you do make it there. What do you do when you're there? Post up in some sort of a little villa down by the beach? All that shit sounds good. I just don't necessarily think that making it out of the country, especially to a place like Mexico, which is essentially somewhat of a third world country, is going to ensure that it's going to be smooth sailing from there for you. And with it being so long that this guy has been on the run, there's other speculation saying that he's potentially off the grid. If you think surviving in Mexico is going to be hard enough, try living off the grid with no prior experience on how to do so. All I know is trying to rub two sticks together to make fire. You're going from a world where we are completely glued to our cell phones and we can't figure out how to do anything on our own without looking that shit up on Google or even asking AI how to do it now. Now we don't even have to use our brains. We only have to think as far as what to ask AI in relation to an answer for a question or a problem that we have. How do I write a resume? What's the answer to this quiz question? With the more advanced that the world becomes, the more dumbed down as a humanity that we become. That's, getting completely off the subject there and going a little extreme with it, but that's how I personally feel. You want to try to live off the grid? What? You ain't never even been camping. I mean, I'm talking about me personally. I really haven't never even been camping. Maybe I should do that. A bit of a social experiment. Try to live off the grid for a week. I mean, there's TV shows, Naked and Afraid and things like that, but I should do it. Try to really tough it out in the woods, acting as if I'm an escaped fugitive. That's actually a really good idea. I don't personally believe this guy is off the grid. Obviously, he's somewhere where he has some help that the authorities are none the wiser or have any idea about. Let's switch gears real quick. I do want to take a little bit of time and talk about Antoine Massey. We know that he was just recently apprehended. We talked about that quite a bit here through a couple of different live streams. But folks, if you've missed it, they have just released his latest mugshot, I'm believing from Angola maximum security state penitentiary down in Louisiana. You want to talk about a third world country? That's what I've heard this prison being referred to as. Do they even have AC down there? I'm not too sure. But here is that latest mugshot of this guy. Another superhero in terms of the public opinion of how people feel about this guy. There was an Instagram created completely dedicated to this guy, referred to as a tribute page, actually where I ran across this mugshot at. And folks, the comments on this do not disappoint neither. This particular image right here has been posted for 6 days. It has garnered 3,581 likes at the time of me filming this. And comments on this post say things like, "We all gotta send bro something." And women leaving comments saying, "That man know he fine." That comment actually received 68 likes. And a couple of replies where it seems like women were actually fighting over this dude in the comment section. If you're out in the world single as a man, this type of stuff has really got to make you feel down bad. Another woman saying, "Baby, you can stop talking about my future husband because when I die and come back, he's mine." Another woman saying, for real, on God. "I'm going to send you some money, baby. No worries." 125 likes on that particular comment. I got to imagine Antoine Massey sitting in Angola right now with 8 of his other constituents. All of the escapees have been sent to Angola, so they're probably all together, or more than likely they're absolutely on lockdown. How long will these guys remain in the shoe? 23 hours on lockdown, 1 hour outside of your cell? Man, imagine being under the jail in a prison, what being in the shoe, solitary confinement, is oftentimes referred to as. Man, imagine being in solitary confinement at Angola, third world country, maximum security state penitentiary in Louisiana. Folks, if you don't know, Angola State Prison has the Angola Annual Rodeo, an event that's held yearly. I've wanted to go to this, but I've never done so because I can't get over the stigma of we are parading prisoners around for the amusement of the public. This shit feels a lot like some sort of a slave carnival to me personally. But at least if they are on lockdown and potentially run the risk of being that way for maybe years. It certainly seems like, at least for Antoine Massey, he does have a few people willing to write and also send that in terms of potential commissary money for him. This post also shares his mailing address. If anybody's interested in writing to this guy, here's how you're able to do so right here. I also often question, would any good come from this escape? And obviously the likely answer there is absolutely F no. But if there's one good thing that could come from this situation, here's a guy who otherwise was going to have probably zero form of support from the outside world. And now all of a sudden, because of this situation, it looks like he'll probably have a lot of support. Y'all think he's got a lot of money on his commissary account right now? Maybe we should write him. Let me share with you one other picture from this Instagram tribute account right here. Take a look at this. This actually looks like Antoine Massey being transported to the helicopter to be con-aired over to Angola. Folks, it looks like somebody was posted up waiting for this transport to happen like they were frickin' TMZ. But look at Buddy with his head held high here. And these state police in tactical gear. We've even got the high beams from that patrol SUV with the lens flare photo effect happening in the background. People have commented saying that this image looks like a freaking album cover. Somebody even commented and said, what, you had a camera crew with you? And what an interesting point to bring up, because you got to imagine that a Netflix series is already in the making in relation to this particular escape. Folks, escapes happen all the time. We've talked about so many of them throughout the course of escape season this particular year, as the weather changes and prisoners just say, you know what? Let me just try my chances on the lam. Hey, if I can break out of here, that's at least half the battle. But in so many of those other stories, they don't really hit the same as this particular one has. And I still question as to why that is. But for whatever the case, the whole world seemed enthralled with this escape that took place on May the 16th down in New Orleans. And crazy to think that at almost 2 months since, there's still one particular prisoner, an elusive Houdini-like individual, Derrick Groves, who still remains on the run. Folks, I wanted to bring you this very latest and hope that you found some interest in this. If you did so, please leave a like and a comment on this video, letting me know exactly what you think. And if you find yourselves new here on After Prison Show, enjoying this content but not yet subscribed, hey, please consider doing so and turning on bell notifications so that you never miss an upload from us. I talk about all sorts of interesting things in relation to true crime and escapes and everything prison related. So definitely check out some of the other content that we have here. As always, until next time, enjoy life, the free world, never take a moment for granted, and make the most of every day. Peace!